The sky has always been a battlefield, but military aviation turned it into something far more dangerous. From jets that fly faster than the speed of sound to pilots who survive the impossible, the history of military aviation is filled with moments that sound like legends. In this video, we're diving into 10 incredible military aviation facts that prove the sky is one of the most extreme frontiers of human engineering and courage. Some of these facts change warfare forever, and some are so unbelievable you might think they're myths. So buckle up and prepare for 10 military aviation facts that will blow your mind. Fact number 1. The fighter jet that landed with one wing. One of the most unbelievable events in military aviation history happened in 1983 with an F-15 Eagle operated by the Israeli Air Force. During a training mission over Israel, an Israeli F-15 D-Baz fighter jet was participating in a dogfight exercise against an A-4 Skyhawk. Training dogfights simulate real combat, allowing pilots to practice aggressive maneuvering at high speeds. But during this exercise, something went terribly wrong. The two aircraft accidentally collided in midair. The A-4 Skyhawk pilot managed to eject safely, but the collision caused catastrophic damage to the F-15. The impact ripped off almost the entire right wing of the aircraft. Normally, losing a wing would cause an aircraft to immediately roll uncontrollably and crash. Wings are essential because they generate lift that keeps a plane in the air. But the F-15 Eagle was built differently. When the Israeli pilot, Zivi Nadivi, regained control of the aircraft, he realized something strange. The jet was still flying. At first, he didn't even realize the wing was gone. The powerful twin engines of the F-15 were producing enormous thrust, and the aircraft's large fuselage design was actually generating enough additional lift to keep the jet airborne. The pilot immediately pushed the throttles into afterburner, dramatically increasing engine power. By flying at a higher speed, the remaining wing and the body of the aircraft created just enough lift to maintain flight. The damaged fighter was now flying at very high speed because slowing down would have caused it to lose lift and crash. The pilot headed back toward base while trying to keep the aircraft stable. When he finally approached the runway, the situation became even more dangerous. Landing requires reducing speed, but slowing the aircraft too much could make it fall out of the sky. To compensate, the pilot performed an extremely fast landing, touching down at nearly double the normal landing speed. The moment the landing gear hit the runway, the pilot deployed the arresting hook to stop the jet quickly before losing control. Against all odds, the aircraft landed successfully. When ground crews saw the jet, they were stunned. Almost the entire right wing was missing. The incident shocked aviation engineers around the world because it demonstrated the incredible survivability and design of the F-15 Eagle. In fact, the damaged aircraft was later repaired and returned to service, flying again after the incident. This event became one of the most famous examples of just how durable modern fighter jets can be. It also proves something extraordinary. Sometimes the impossible can still fly. Fact number 2. The SR-71 Blackbird, the plane that outran missiles. One of the most legendary aircraft ever built is the SR-71 Blackbird, a secret spy plane developed during the Cold War by Lockheed Skunk Works for the United States Air Force. The aircraft first flew in 1964, at a time when the United States needed a way to gather intelligence over hostile territory without being shot down. Earlier spy planes like the Lockheed U-2 had already proven vulnerable. In 1960, a U-2 was shot down over the Soviet Union, creating a massive international crisis. The solution was simple in theory, but extremely difficult in practice. Build an aircraft so fast and so high that enemy missiles couldn't catch it. The result was the SR-71 Blackbird. The Blackbird could fly at speeds exceeding Mach 3.2, more than 2,200 miles per hour, 3,540 kilometers per hour. At that speed, the aircraft could travel from New York to Los Angeles in about 1 hour. But speed wasn't the only advantage. The SR-71 also flew at altitudes above 85,000 feet, far higher than most aircraft. At that height, the sky appears almost black, and the curvature of the Earth becomes visible to the pilots. Operating at such extreme speeds created enormous challenges. As the aircraft flew faster than 3 times the speed of sound, friction with the air heated the plane's skin to over 500 degrees Fahrenheit, 260 degrees Celsius. Because of this intense heat, engineers couldn't build the aircraft using normal aluminum like most airplanes. Instead, about 85% of the SR-71 was constructed from titanium, a metal strong enough to survive extreme temperatures. The aircraft was so advanced that its fuel tanks actually leaked on the ground. Engineers designed them this way because the metal expanded when heated at high speed, sealing the tanks during flight. But what made the SR-71 truly legendary was how it handled enemy attacks. During reconnaissance missions, enemy radar systems frequently detected the aircraft and launched surface-to-air missiles to intercept it. According to SR-71 pilots, the response was almost routine. When a missile launch was detected, the pilot would simply push the throttles forward and accelerate. The standard procedure was essentially outrun the missile. Because the aircraft was already flying at extreme altitude and speed, accelerating slightly faster often made the missile unable to catch up. Over its entire operational career, the SR-71 flew thousands of missions over some of the most heavily defended regions on Earth. And despite facing over 4,000 missile launch attempts, not a single SR-71 was ever shot down by enemy fire. The aircraft also set numerous world records. In 1976, the SR-71 set the record for the fastest air-breathing manned aircraft, reaching 2,193 miles per hour. That record still stands today. The Blackbird remained in service for decades before finally retiring in 1998. Even now, more than half a century later, no operational aircraft has officially surpassed its speed record. The SR-71 Blackbird proves something remarkable about aviation technology. Sometimes the best defense isn't stealth or armor. Sometimes the best defense is simply being too fast to catch. Fact number 3, the only time a pilot shot down an aircraft with a handgun. One of the most unbelievable stories in aviation history happened during World War II and involved an American pilot who may have shot down an enemy aircraft while falling through the sky under a parachute. The pilot was Owen J. Baggett, a member of the United States Army Air Forces. The event took place on March 31, 1943, during a bombing mission over Burma, which is now known as Myanmar. Baggett was flying aboard a B-24 Liberator as part of a formation assigned to attack a railway bridge controlled by Japanese forces. As the bombers approached the target, they were intercepted by several Japanese fighter planes, including the highly maneuverable Mitsubishi A6 M0. The Zero was one of the most feared fighters of the war. It was lighter and more agile than most Allied aircraft and could easily outmaneuver the heavy American bombers. The Japanese fighters quickly attacked the formation. During the battle, Baggett's B-24 was hit multiple times. One of the engines caught fire, and the bomber began to lose altitude. With the aircraft badly damaged and the situation becoming hopeless, the crew was forced to abandon the plane. Baggett and the other crew members jumped from the bomber and deployed their parachutes. While descending toward the ground, Baggett noticed something terrifying. A Japanese Zero fighter was flying low near the falling airman. The enemy pilot appeared to be making another pass, possibly to strafe the parachuting crew, a practice that occasionally occurred during the war. Baggett decided to play dead. Hanging in his parachute harness, he went limp and pretended he had already been killed. The Zero fighter flew extremely close to him. According to later reports, the Japanese pilot slowed down and opened the canopy slightly to get a better look at the falling airman. At that moment, Bagot acted. He pulled out his .45 caliber M1911 pistol, the standard sidearm carried by many American airmen, and fired several shots at the approaching aircraft. Amazingly, witnesses reported that one of the shots appeared to hit the Japanese pilot. The Zero fighter suddenly stalled, rolled, and crashed into the ground. If the report is correct, it would represent the only recorded instance in aviation history of an aircraft being shot down by a handgun fired from a parachuting pilot. After landing on the ground, Bagot was captured by Japanese forces and spent the remainder of the war as a prisoner of war before being liberated in 1945. Historians note that while the exact details cannot be completely verified, the story was documented by Bagot and supported by several witnesses from the bomber crew. Even today, the story remains one of the most extraordinary moments in aviation combat history. It serves as a reminder that sometimes survival in war depends not only on machines and technology, but also on quick thinking, courage, and a little bit of unbelievable luck. Fact number 4. The first jet versus jet dogfight in history. One of the most important moments in military aviation history happened during the early days of the Korean War. It was the moment when jet fighters first fought each other in combat. Before this conflict, most air battles during World War II were fought between propeller-driven aircraft like the P-51 Mustang and the Messerschmitt Bf-109. Jet aircraft were introduced near the end of World War II, but they rarely fought each other in combat. That changed in 1950, when war broke out on the Korean Peninsula. On November 8, 1950, American pilots flying the F-80 Shooting Star encountered Soviet-built MiG-15 aircraft in the skies over Korea. This moment marked the first jet versus jet dogfight in aviation history. The F-80 Shooting Star was one of the first operational jet fighters used by the United States Air Force. It was faster than propeller aircraft and represented the next generation of air combat technology. But the MiG-15 was an even more advanced fighter. Developed by the Soviet Union, the MiG-15 had swept wings that allowed it to perform better at high speeds. It was also equipped with powerful cannons designed to destroy heavy bombers. When the American F-80 pilots encountered the MiG-15s, the two aircraft engaged in a high-speed dogfight over North Korea. The American pilot, Russell J. Brown, maneuvered behind one of the MiG-15s during the fight. Using the 6.50 caliber machine guns mounted in the nose of his F-80, Brown opened fire on the enemy jet. According to U.S. Air Force reports, the MiG-15 was hit and began to lose control before crashing. If confirmed, this victory represented the first time in history that a jet fighter had shot down another jet fighter in combat. The event marked a turning point in aviation warfare. Suddenly, the speed of combat had dramatically increased. Propeller aircraft that once dominated the skies were quickly becoming obsolete. The Korean War soon became famous for intense jet battles in an area called MiG Alley, a region near the Chinese border where American and Communist forces frequently clashed in the air. Later in the war, the United States introduced the legendary F-86 Sabre, which became the MiG-15's main rival. The MiG-15 and the F-86 Sabre would go on to fight hundreds of aerial battles, helping define modern air combat tactics. These dogfights shaped the future of fighter aircraft design, emphasizing speed, altitude, maneuverability, and advanced weapon systems. The skies over Korea became the birthplace of the jet-age dogfight. What started as a new technology quickly transformed the nature of aerial warfare forever. From that moment on, air combat would never again move at the speed of propellers. It would move at the speed of jets. Fact number 5. The fastest combat jet ever built. The MiG-25 Foxbat. During the height of the Cold War, speed became one of the most important weapons in military aviation. The faster a fighter aircraft could fly, the harder it would be for enemies to intercept or destroy it. This race for speed led the Soviet Union to develop one of the most extreme aircraft ever built, the MiG-25 Foxbat. Designed by the Soviet aerospace company Mikoyan Gurevich, the MiG-25 first flew in 1964 and entered service in 1970 with the Soviet Air Forces. At the time, Western intelligence agencies were extremely worried about the aircraft. Early radar tracking suggested the MiG-25 was incredibly fast and could reach very high altitudes. Western analysts feared that the aircraft might even outperform the American F-15 Eagle that was still under development. The MiG-25 was built primarily as a high-speed interceptor. Its mission was to climb rapidly and intercept enemy bombers or reconnaissance aircraft before they could reach Soviet territory. To achieve this goal, engineers focused heavily on raw speed and power. The aircraft was powered by two massive Tumansky R-15 turbojet engines, which generated enormous thrust. With both engines in afterburner, the MiG-25 could reach speeds above Mach 2.8, nearly 1,900 miles per hour, 3,000 kilometers per hour. However, pilots reported that the aircraft could actually exceed Mach 3 under certain conditions. Flying that fast came with a serious problem: heat. At speeds above Mach 3, friction with the air causes temperatures on the aircraft's surface to rise dramatically. Aluminum would weaken under these conditions, so Soviet engineers used a surprising solution. Instead of titanium like the American SR-71 Blackbird, the MiG-25 was built mostly from nickel-steel alloy. About 80% of the aircraft was made from steel, which made the jet extremely strong, but also very heavy. Despite its weight, the Foxbat had incredible performance. The MiG-25 could climb to altitudes above 80,000 feet, allowing it to intercept high-flying reconnaissance aircraft and bombers. In 1977, a specially modified MiG-25 even set an aviation record by reaching an altitude of 123,523 feet, 37,650 meters, one of the highest altitudes ever reached by a jet aircraft. The aircraft also gained international attention in 1976, when Soviet pilot Viktor Belenko defected to Japan by flying his MiG-25 to the airport in Hakodate. For the first time, Western engineers were able to examine the mysterious aircraft up close. What they discovered surprised them. Although the MiG-25 was extremely fast and powerful, it was not designed for close dogfights. Instead, it was optimized for speed, altitude, and interception missions. Even so, the Foxbat proved itself in real combat. During the Middle East conflicts of the 1970s, MiG-25 aircraft flown by Iraqi and Syrian pilots performed high-speed reconnaissance missions that were extremely difficult for enemy fighters to intercept. To this day, the MiG-25 remains one of the fastest combat aircraft ever built. It proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the sky is not maneuverability, but pure, unstoppable speed. Fact number 6. The night a B-52 tail gunner shot down a MiG fighter. One of the most unusual air-to-air victories in military aviation history happened during the Vietnam War, when a crew member on a bomber, not a fighter pilot, shot down an enemy jet. The aircraft involved was the legendary B-52 Stratofortress, one of the largest and longest-serving bombers ever built. Originally designed during the early Cold War, the B-52 was created by Boeing as a long-range strategic bomber capable of delivering massive payloads over intercontinental distances. By the time of the Vietnam War, B-52 bombers were heavily used by the United States Air Force for large bombing campaigns against targets in North Vietnam. Despite their size and heavy defensive systems, B-52 bombers were sometimes intercepted by fast North Vietnamese fighter jets, such as the MiG-21. During a major bombing campaign called Operation Linebacker II in December 1972, Large formations of B-52 bombers flew night missions over heavily defended territory. These missions were extremely dangerous. North Vietnamese forces launched surface-to-air missiles, anti-aircraft artillery, and fighter interceptors to stop the bombers. Each B-52 carried defensive weapons to protect itself from fighters approaching from behind. In the tail section of the bomber sat a tail gunner, operating remotely controlled machine guns designed to shoot down pursuing aircraft. On the night of December 18, 1972, a B-52D bomber was flying a mission over North Vietnam when enemy fighters began approaching the formation. The bomber's tail gunner, Samuel O. Turner, detected a MiG-21 fighter closing in from behind. Turner carefully tracked the approaching jet using his radar-guided guns. As the MiG moved into range, he opened fire using the bomber's 4.50 caliber machine guns. The bullets struck the MiG-21, and the enemy fighter burst into flames before crashing. This moment became historic because it was the first time a B-52 bomber shot down a fighter aircraft in air-to-air combat. Just days later, another B-52 gunner, Albert E. Moore, also shot down a MiG-21 during the same campaign. These events were remarkable because B-52 bombers were never designed to dogfight fighters. They were massive aircraft, over 159 feet long with a wingspan of 185 feet, and were far slower and less maneuverable than fighter jets. Yet the defensive systems and skilled crew members aboard the bombers allowed them to fight back effectively. Over the decades, the B-52 Stratofortress has continued to serve in the U.S. Air Force and remains one of the longest-serving military aircraft ever built. Some B-52s flying today are expected to remain in service for more than 80 years after they were first introduced. The story of the B-52 tail gunner shooting down a MiG fighter proves something surprising about aerial combat. Sometimes the hunter becomes the target, and even a giant bomber can win a fight against a supersonic fighter jet. Fact number 7. The first stealth aircraft used in combat, the F-117 Nighthawk. One of the most revolutionary developments in military aviation was the creation of stealth technology, aircraft designed to avoid detection by radar. The first operational aircraft built specifically for this purpose was the F-117 Nighthawk. Developed in secret by Lockheed Skunk Works, the F-117 was introduced in the early 1980s and operated by the United States Air Force. Unlike traditional fighter jets with smooth aerodynamic curves, the F-117 had a strange and futuristic appearance. Its surface consisted of flat, angular panels, giving it a shape that looked almost like a flying diamond. This unusual design was intentional. Radar works by sending out radio waves that bounce off objects and return to the radar receiver. Traditional aircraft reflect these signals strongly, making them easy to detect. But the angular surfaces of the F-117 were designed to scatter radar waves away from the radar source, dramatically reducing the aircraft's radar signature. In addition, the aircraft was coated with special radar-absorbing materials that helped absorb radar energy rather than reflect it. The result was an aircraft that could fly through heavily defended airspace while remaining extremely difficult for enemy radar systems to detect. Because the project was so secret, the existence of the F-117 was not publicly acknowledged until 1988, several years after the aircraft had already entered service. The real test of the stealth aircraft came during the Gulf War in 1991. During the opening hours of the conflict, F-117 Nighthawks were among the first aircraft sent into Iraqi airspace. Their mission was extremely dangerous: destroy heavily defended targets in the capital city of Baghdad, which was protected by one of the most advanced air defense systems in the region. Despite representing only about 2% of the total coalition aircraft, the F-117 fleet was responsible for striking roughly 40% of the most important strategic targets during the early stages of the war. Flying mostly at night, the stealth jets attacked command centers, communication hubs, and critical infrastructure. The aircraft carried precision-guided bombs, allowing pilots to destroy targets with remarkable accuracy. Perhaps most impressive was the aircraft's survival rate. Throughout the entire Gulf War, the F-117 flew over 1,200 combat missions with an extremely high success rate. Not a single F-117 was lost to enemy fire during the conflict. The aircraft's performance shocked military analysts around the world and proved that stealth technology could dramatically change the nature of modern warfare. However, stealth technology was not perfect. In 1999, during the Kosovo War, a Yugoslav air defense unit successfully shot down an F-117 using a surface-to-air missile. The incident showed that even stealth aircraft could still be vulnerable under certain conditions. Even so, the F-117 had already proven its revolutionary impact on military aviation. It paved the way for newer stealth aircraft like the F-22 Raptor and the F-35 Lightning II. The F-117 Nighthawk demonstrated that in modern warfare, the most powerful weapon might not be speed or firepower. Sometimes the greatest advantage is not being seen at all. Fact number 9. The fastest manned aircraft ever built. The X-15 rocket plane. One of the most extraordinary aircraft ever built was the North American X-15, an experimental rocket plane that pushed the limits of speed, altitude, and aerospace technology. The X-15 program was developed during the late 1950s as a joint project between NASA, the United States Air Force, and the United States Navy. The aircraft was built by North American Aviation with the goal of studying how aircraft behave at extreme hypersonic speeds and near space altitudes. Unlike traditional airplanes that take off from runways, the X-15 used a very unusual launch method. The rocket plane was carried to high altitude by a modified B-52 Stratofortress. The X-15 was mounted under the wing of the B-52 and released at an altitude of around 45,000 feet. Once released, the pilot ignited the aircraft's powerful XLR-99 rocket engine. This engine produced enormous thrust and burned a mixture of liquid oxygen and ammonia fuel. Within seconds, the X-15 accelerated to speeds far beyond what any conventional jet aircraft could achieve. In 1967, pilot William J. Knight flew the X-15 to a record speed of Mach 6.7, which is about 4,520 miles per hour, 7,274 kilometers per hour. This made the X-15 the fastest manned aircraft ever flown, a record that still stands today. To understand how fast that is, imagine flying from Los Angeles to New York in less than 45 minutes. But speed wasn't the only extreme feature of the X-15. The aircraft also flew at incredibly high altitudes. Several flights climbed above 50 miles, 80 kilometers, above Earth, reaching the edge of space. Because of this, many X-15 pilots were later officially recognized as astronauts. One pilot in particular, Joseph A. Walker, flew the X-15 to an altitude of 354,200 feet, 107.8 kilometers, in 1963, making him one of the first people to reach space in a winged aircraft. Flying at such extreme speeds created enormous engineering challenges. At hypersonic velocities, friction with the atmosphere heats the aircraft's surface to extremely high temperatures. To survive this, the X-15 was built from a special nickel-based alloy called Inconel X, which could withstand temperatures above 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, 650 degrees Celsius. Pilots also had to wear pressurized spacesuits because the air at those altitudes was far too thin to breathe. The X-15 program flew 199 missions between 1959 and 1968, gathering valuable scientific data about high-speed flight, atmospheric re-entry, and aerospace engineering. Many technologies tested on the X-15 later influenced the design of spacecraft such as the Space Shuttle. Even today, more than half a century later, the X-15 remains one of the most important research aircraft ever built. It proved that human pilots could control aircraft traveling faster than 6 times the speed of sound and operating at the edge of space. The X-15 wasn't just an airplane. It was the aircraft that helped bridge the gap between aviation and spaceflight. Fact number 8. The thud that survived the most dangerous missions of the Vietnam War. One of the most heavily used and most dangerous aircraft missions in military aviation history involved the powerful F-105 Thunder Chief during the Vietnam War. Nicknamed the Thud by its pilots, the F-105 Thunder Chief was developed by Republic Aviation and introduced into service with the United States Air Force in the late 1950s. The aircraft was originally designed for a very specific Cold War mission: deliver a nuclear weapon at high speed and low altitude deep inside enemy territory. But when the Vietnam War began, the F-105 found itself performing a very different role. Instead of nuclear strikes, the Thunder Chief became the primary aircraft for conventional bombing missions over North Vietnam, and those missions were incredibly dangerous. The F-105 was a large, single-engine fighter bomber capable of flying faster than Mach 2, or more than 1,300 miles per hour. It was also able to carry a huge bomb load, sometimes over 14,000 pounds of bombs, which was comparable to the payload of some World War II bombers. However, the aircraft had to fly directly into one of the most heavily defended airspaces in the world. North Vietnam had built an extremely dense network of surface-to-air missiles, radar systems, anti-aircraft artillery, and fighter interceptors. Pilots flying F-105 missions had to descend to very low altitude and fly at high speed to avoid radar detection. Even then, the risk was enormous. Between 1965 and 1968, F-105 Thunder Chiefs flew the majority of U.S. strike missions over North Vietnam during operations like Operation Rolling Thunder. The aircraft performed nearly 75% of all bombing missions during the early years of the air campaign. But the price was high. Out of roughly 833 F-105 aircraft built, about 395 were lost during the war, many of them shot down by anti-aircraft fire or surface-to-air missiles. Despite these heavy losses, the Thunder Chief became famous for the courage and skill of the pilots who flew it. One particularly dangerous role flown by the F-105 was the Wild Weasel mission. Wild Weasel aircraft were specially equipped to hunt and destroy enemy radar and missile sites. These pilots would intentionally provoke enemy radar systems to turn on so they could locate and attack them with specialized anti-radiation missiles. The unofficial motto of Wild Weasel pilots became legendary: first in, last out. It meant that these aircraft entered the most dangerous airspace first and stayed the longest to suppress enemy defenses. Despite its losses, the F-105 Thunder Chief proved to be a remarkably tough aircraft. It was capable of absorbing significant battle damage and still bringing pilots safely home. By the end of the Vietnam War, the Thunder Chief had become one of the most iconic aircraft of the conflict. It demonstrated the extreme risks faced by strike pilots and the intensity of modern air warfare. Today, the F-105 is remembered not just as a powerful aircraft, but as a symbol of the courage and resilience of the pilots who flew some of the most dangerous missions in aviation history. Military aviation has always pushed the limits of what humans and machines can do. From fighters surviving impossible damage to aircraft flying faster than 3 times the speed of sound, the skies have witnessed some of the most incredible moments in history. These were just 10 amazing facts, but the world of aviation is filled with thousands more unbelievable stories. So if you love aviation, fighter jets, and the incredible technology that rules the skies, make sure you subscribe and follow for more incredible aviation stories, because the next story might be even more unbelievable.